Wow. I knew of the novel by Matt Ruff, and I also knew that HBO was making a show based off the novel called Lovecraft Country, but I had not checked out the trailers or any of the promotional materials of the show prior to watching episode 1. I wanted to go in cold, as they say, and I'm so glad that I did. Within the first minute and a half, in an opening sequence that actually reminded me of the opening sequence to Firefly for no real reason, I was sold. The sequence starts off in monochrome with baseball player Jackie Robinson's quote about the American dream playing in the background to turning into a full-colored fever dream of cross-genre orgy of mid-century science fiction. Now, if that sounds confusing to you, it kinda was. But that's a whole separate thing that we can talk about later. The story is set in 1954, and Atticus Freeman returns home from the Korean War because his father has gone missing. Early on in the story, we're told that he enjoys pulp fiction, which is something his father did not approve of. He wanted his son to read, quote, real literature. From what Atticus or Tick tells us, he didn't particularly have an enjoyable childhood, and he found refuge in pulp sci-fi. And as the first literary reference the show throws at us is the Edgar Rice Burroughs pen The Princess of Mars, which Atticus was reading on his bus ride from Florida back to Chicago. And early on, the show raises an interesting question. John Carter was a Confederate soldier and he fought for slavery. So how can a black man enjoy a story about a white pro-slave ownership protagonist? Which can be considered the entire raison d'etre of Lovecraft Country, in the sense that this is a story about black protagonists based on works by a racist. Yes, Mr. Lovecraft was a virulent racist, and as such, in today's cancel culture climate, where we retroactively try to hold creators accountable for their work, do we watch a show which furthers the conversation about racism, all the while borrowing imagery and works of a racist? I think that's quite an interesting discussion. The first episode is really well made. The pacing is on the money, with the actors doing a fine job of bringing to life these characters as the show tries to not so subtly tell you that we are the real monsters. The color grading is on point, as are some of the shots. Actor Jonathan Major brings an awkwardness and realism to the character of Atticus that is easy to step into his shoes and feel his issues bubble to the surface. He holds deep resentment towards his father and the fact that his father hated that he went off to fight for a country that hated Atticus himself. But Atticus only resents the notion his father holds even more because he went off to the army just to get away from his father. His uncle George Turner, played by Courtney B. Vance, writes a guidebook for African American people called Safe N-Word Travel Guide. It's based on a real book that was written from 1936 to 1966. The guidebook basically details which places to avoid in USA if you want to avoid getting your ass capped for being a different color. The third major character is Letitia Lewis, played by Journey Smollett, who can totally step on my neck by the way, is Atticus's childhood friend and a person it seems everyone in her family hates. Probably because she keeps asking them for money. But I don't see much of her character arc yet. She seems like a strong woman archetype and just that. Not much motivation or background to her in episode 1. So our three protagonists set off on a journey into the southern heartlands of America to find Atticus's father Montrose. Beset by Jim Crow laws and sundown towns. Well, full disclosure, I had no idea what a sundown town or county was before this show, so the show has immediate value to me by teaching me something. So the trio has to navigate the racist 50s America where killing a black person and killing a raccoon have the same criminal charges, all the while being accosted by the supernatural. The last 20 minutes of the show is amazing. It just takes off. I grinned when Atticus referenced Shoggoths from At the Mountains of Madness, and I kind of figured they would be the creatures of the week for this episode. I wasn't expecting them to show up the way they did though. Very reminiscent of the first time we see the monster in A Quiet Place. But the sequence preceding the monster is one of the best paced, nerve-wracking sequences I've ever seen on screen. It's an excellent sequence that's full of dread and horror that actually renders the monsters to follow later a bit tame. Brilliant direction on that sequence and amazing job by the dude who played the sheriff. I'm too lazy to look him up. Overall, the first episode was brilliant. I loved every second of it and the pacing was so good that I hadn't realized an hour and 10 minutes had gone by. From what I hear, the rest of the 5 episodes sent out to reviewers aren't as good and the quality drops off significantly, at least in terms of storytelling, which is a major bummer. But this is a show I'm invested in now and will definitely want to watch how it turns out. Thank you for watching the video guys, we really appreciate your time. There are other videos on the channel if you want to check them out. Do consider subscribing as it means a lot to us and to our target of reaching 1,000 subscribers ASAP. We hope you tune in for the review for the other episodes as they air. This is Munazal, tipping out of here.